Hello, my friends, and welcome to Postscript. It's nice to have you with us today. This is a special interview with a friend, an old acquaintance from a long, long time ago, James Howard Kunstler. Hello, Jim. How are you, my friend?
Hi, John. I'm road testing my new blue light glasses for
I have
trying
some.
to improve your brain from staring into a computer
I have some.
incessantly.
I have some of those as well. I'm excited about talking to you a little bit here, Jim. We're looking forward to having you with us here in January here in Berkeley Springs. All that information is at transitiontalks.org. And so we would hope all of our viewers to check it out. Jim Kunstler is a marvelous kind of writer and pundit. He's an author of quite a few books, and he's shows up on well-known podcasts from around the world, RT and other kinds of places. He and I ran into each other. He invited me to lunch, as a matter of fact, in Pennsylvania after a speaking engagement where he talked in Pennsylvania, where um, at an agriculture conference. And so
Um,
we've kind of loosely kept connected since then.
is that Penn State?
Yeah, it was up there, yeah, near Penn State at that place. What
Yeah.
I forget what they call that show. But the thing that I've always found really fascinating about what you do, Jim, is that from my business being a futurist, I look at you and say he's a de facto futurist. This guy thinks systemically about how things work together. He's not narrow, he's wide. And then, of course, your book about how the world would look if all the electricity went out and everybody was back to horses and stuff uh, was a marvelous kind of essay on the possibilities as a scenario in the terms of the
Mhm.
futures business. And so we're really looking. You're very well known for having a unique and sophisticated and novel, I guess, perspective on the way the world works right now and where it's going. And so that's why we're particularly interested in looking forward to having you on the 13th. So what's
Well,
on your
thank
mind?
you.
Yeah.
But what I'm mostly preoccupied with these days is why Western civilization wants to commit suicide.
Mm.
And I must say it's a question that baffles a lot of people who are bright, and they are perplexed by it, sore perplexed by it. I think one of the attendant problems with that is that we're seeing uh, the surrender of the entire intellectual class of Western Civ, and in particular in our country, in America, the academics, the university presidents, and the faculties, the people in the arts and showbiz and the media. We're seeing this entire class surrender to a sort of what appears to be a group psychosis,
Yeah.
and in support of a totalitarian takeover of our society. And there are many of us out there who object to that. Um, the, our society was already on a kind of a dangerous trajectory in terms of the on-the-ground economy and the financial module of the economy that is intended to serve the on-the-ground economy, but has really become kind of a Frankenstein monster of its own. And then we had our adventure with an outsider trying to correct a lot of that. That would be Mr. Trump. And the system seemed to respond to him like the immune system
Yeah.
responds to some kind of an invading organism.
All right.
And that immune system response has been described as the deep state. And I don't want to sound like I'm some kind of a conspiracy theorist um, here, but I do think that the administrative state or the bureaucratic state, or whatever you want to call it, uh, I call it the blob, and I'm not the only one who calls it that. Really, and a lot of that blobbery really emanates from the Intel community, which is a part of our society that has run amok and is working very hard now to destroy the foundations of democratic republic, despite the fact that it accuses those of us who complain with trying to undermine democracy.
Yeah.
So the failure of the intellectual class is a staggering development. These are the people who used to be against totalitarian policy and behavior. They used to be against an overweening amok state. They used to be against the fabrication of alternate realities. And now they're totally bought into it, and it's a disgrace. We have a class of people in this country who have dishonored themselves and disgraced themselves and the country. And what are we going to do about it? Well, I think that we're going to continue to say no. We're going to continue to resist and oppose and speak out and do our own reality testing so that we can create some kind of a coherent consensus about what's happening to us, so we can actually generate some kind of a coherent plan for what to do about it.
Do you have
And
any idea? Do you have any idea what's driving all of that?
well, as I said earlier, it's confounding because some of it appears to be simply an end of cycle great wave phenomenon.
Right.
I mean, we've seen this repeatedly in history where great empires and civilizations crack up.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily do it because they want to do it, or it doesn't appear to be. But, forces tend to coalesce that undermine their ability to thrive. And that's what we're seeing here. I don't know if this is different per se, but I do think that this surrender of the intellectual class to sheer nonsense and tyranny is really a remarkable feature. Now, we've seen pieces of it before in history. I think probably the best example of it was the Jacobin phase of the French Revolution. And the Jacobins came along in 1793, and those of you who read history know that the French Revolution really starts in about 1789 with the fall of the Bastille, and then you get 4 years of rather slow and corrosive action and protests and the takedown of the monarchy and the aristocracy, and that all climaxes with the execution of the king and the queen. And then the Jacobins come into power, and they sit on the left side of the National Assembly. So they are the left. And they begin to try to impose upon French society a whole set of nutty cultural changes that are really rather extreme. They decide they're going to abolish the Catholic Church. And you can argue, of course, whether the Catholic Church is a good thing or a bad thing. And 18th century France or Europe in particular, or in general, you can argue that. But that was a big change to deprive people of, their belief system. They did a lot of other like weird little things, like change the number of days in the week from 7 to 10. And they stuck another month in the calendar, which disordered the calendar. Generally, what you get with Jacobinism is an attempt to disorder society in a major way. And that's exactly what you've seen with this absurd woke revolution that seems to have emanated out of academia. That is, people who ought to know better, people who ought to know history and people who ought to understand how pernicious it is to do these things, and yet, they've done it. Uh, I would say that, it appears to also have what we call Marxist characteristics. Um, Kind of a gag about the Chinese saying that they had capitalism with Chinese characteristics. Um, so we've got Marxism now running amok in America, and this insane utopian belief that we're just going to level everybody, and including the outcome of every human life and all endeavor, and that'll make the world into a utopian, corner of the universe. So we've been fighting that nonsense and all the stuff that comes out of it. The tide seems to be turning a little bit on that with the recent business in Israel with the Hamas attack and the response to it. I'm getting a raft of letters incessantly from people who are um, uh, wringing their hands about Hamas. But, my answer to that is pretty simple. Never again means never again. What part of that don't you understand? And but that created a big flap in academia, and it was enough, I think, to begin to put academia into what is shaping up to be a big struggle session, as the Marxists put it. They are now going to have to struggle with all of this cognitive dissonance that they've ramped up. Having gone all in on censorship and taking down freedom of speech and the First Amendment. Now they have tried to mount some kind of a counterattack to that about saying that it's okay to kill Jews. And as it happens, many people on the faculties of these colleges and many of their donors and many of their graduates and alumni, et cetera, are Jewish, and they have thrown a stick of dynamite back into the Ivy League, challenging them about this. And we're going to, we haven't begun to see how it's worked out, except for the resignation of one college president. So, I know I'm all over the place with this, answering your question, but there is a tremendous amount of disorder in our society right now. A lot of it seems to kind of concentrate on the political end of the transect. But it's spreading, I think, through the social, economic, financial quadrants of everyday life. And we're looking at a very disorderly 2024.
Yeah. I'm reading this book called The Sovereign Individual, which was written 25 years ago by Davidson and Rees Mogg.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I'm just I'm late to the party, I guess, because I'm just getting around to reading it. But I'm really impressed because they, like you, go back to history and look at all these major changes, the end of chivalry and the transition into the kind of Enlightenment or whatever, and they find the same kinds of disruptions, social disruption, the dominant kind of organizing intellectual framework, whether it's the Catholic Church or the whole idea of chivalry, of everybody making these personal vows that were far more important than anything else, and that they would die, before they would move, 40 yards back from the field of battle, because they had promised that they would, under no conditions would they ever retreat. There was a lot of really interesting. Anyway, they were
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the things that is most conspicuously absent now in our society is personal honor.
Yeah.
Of the people who are doing these ridiculous things, like the entire news media.
Right.
Where's the personal honor of these reporters who are just, in the service of the CIA and the FBI?
Yeah.
It's just the disgrace that they're racking up is out of this world.
See, well, I guess that it has to do with their upbringing, in particular the families and their education, and that they were in one of these uh, generational segments that in the Howe and the generations guys in the fourth turning, Neil Howe and Bill Strauss
Strauss,
and Howe
yeah.
talked about, to where they were in one of these spaces where, you know, the whole structure is different. And so they see the world in a different kind of way. But
Well, I
it's
don't know, you know, you can look at the entire editorial staff, including the, you know, the higher up editors of the New York Times and the exalted columnists and pundits and op-ed writers. And, you know, it's the same, you know, to some extent, it's the same gang of people who were there 11 years ago.
mhm,
But, you know, that same gang of people has completely lost their minds, you know,
yeah.
they're basically inveighing uh, against the foundations of our country. And
Yeah, but
you know,
everybody,
I interviewed Matthias Desmet, the psychologist from the University of Ghent, who published a
right.
book called The
Yeah,
Psychology of Totalitarianism earlier, I
yeah,
guess in 2022. And you know, his theory of mass formation psychosis is one of the few ideas that even answers this quandary about who is leading us here and why and
right.
how. But
Well, that then begs the question, who figured that out and is using it in this such an sophisticated and extraordinary way to drive this whole thing to the extent that it is being driven?
oh, I think all the pieces were in place. What really kind of snapped it all together was the maturing of the internet and social media into devices that could be easily hijacked by propagandists, intel agents, agencies, interested parties, you know, political parties. And so the
Right.
Democratic Party has, you know, it's amazing to me who lived through the 1960s. You know, I was a college student from 66 to 70. And, you know, these same people who are running these operations are the same people who, you know, went to college with me and were against the authoritarianism of the government that led us into the Vietnam War and against the mischief of the FBI and the CIA. And now all of a sudden they're you know, they're the staunchest supporters of all of these runaway agencies that are really harming a lot of people. And yet we're not able to put that together and we're not able to talk to our friends and relatives about it. So in a way, you know, we're being subject to the same kind of social pressure that the people of Germany were in 1937, you know, where
Right.
they couldn't talk about things that they saw around them. And, you know, to the degree that their careers, their lives,
Yeah,
their
exactly.
welfare would be in jeopardy.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to put your finger up in the air and figure out which way the wind is blowing.
Yeah, as
And
Bob said, you don't need a weatherman.
that's right. Yeah. So it's well, it's fascinating. What's your guess about where it's going?
I think we're in for an extremely disorderly year. That the Democratic Party, or the Party of Chaos, as I like to call it these days, you know, led by Joe Biden, who's pretending to run for president, and nobody believes that he's actually running. That's one of the biggest gags of all. That you know, when Goebbels was operating as the propaganda minister in Germany in the 30s, he used to say, "If you're going to tell a lie, tell a whopper."
Yeah,
And, you know, this is a whopper that Joe Biden's running for president. I mean, not only is he obviously incapable, but the guy is, you know, liable to all kinds of criminal prosecutions. So the whole thing is preposterous. And, um, and yet, you know, they're going to try everything they can to defeat their adversary, Mr. Trump, and their other adversary, Bobby Kennedy, who's kind of a dark horse at this point, you know, maybe on the coming up on the outside a bit more than people maybe really understand, because this disorder is leading to a place that is going to favor someone like him if he doesn't, you know, make a terrible mistake. Personally, uh, on the one hand, I think Mr. Trump would probably uh, be in a position to correct a lot of things if he was not assassinated. Um, so I think that it would probably be worthwhile reelecting him at this point. But I'm also in favor of having a hard listen at Bobby Kennedy. I think they'll both be staunchly opposed, and obviously the authorities are doing all they can to use the machinery of lawfare to prevent Donald Trump from operating as a candidate. But the cases they brought against him are so idiotic
Right.
that it would seem that in the normal course of things, which can take a while because the mills of the law grind slowly. But in the normal course of things, I think he would overcome every one of those cases against him. They're all ridiculous.
What's your sense
And
about?
it says one more thing. It says something about his enemies that they were only able to come up with cases that are that lame.
Yeah.
You know, that it shows what really a desperate opposition they are. So I'm kind of looking forward to watching this combat. And I'm fairly optimistic that we're going to overcome these Marxist savage lunatics.
Well, there's a lot of indications that suggest that, but there are, other things in the space, including
Yep.
big financial disruptions.
That's right. I think they'll blow up the financial system if all else fails.
Well, it may not even require them blowing it up. It may just collapse on its own. We've had David Martin. I don't know if you
I
know
know,
that.
David. Yeah.
Yeah, David's an old friend, used to be on my board, and he was here a couple of years ago, and he said, it's inevitable by 2027, 2029 at the very latest. The whole system hits the wall.
I don't
And
see how I don't see how we can survive the current debt
yeah,
quandary that we're in.
well, which is
Because
why
it's
they're
got,
trying to,
all these things have gone hockey stick
yeah.
now. And when that happens, you're done.
Well, they're trying to reset this whole thing because they can't get out of it any other way than, as you say, blow it up and then kind of start over again. And it's really existential in ways that you haven't seen anything like this in kind of in human history as we know it, I guess.
Well, not at this scale because,
Yeah,
the human endeavor has never been organized with such complexity
that's right.
and at such a scale. And that's the thing about the
And the
financial system.
metabolism of the system because of the internet and so on. Yeah,
Yeah. And the financial system, when you look at the devices that are being used to represent capital, all of these derivatives and
yeah,
janky
yeah,
bets
yeah.
and all the kind of banking duct tape and baling wire that is being used to hold them all together and preventing them from falling apart. It doesn't look good. So I think what it's all heading for is the destruction of a lot of things that affect to signify wealth. And it will appear to be a loss of wealth, but it'll be more like a loss of things that appear to be wealth that,
Yeah.
that never should have signified wealth in the first place, but we're kind of turned into a hologram of wealth. And the macro trends that I see, and they've been in place for a while, are relocalization of human endeavor and downscaling of most of the gigantic things that we depend upon right now, whether it's gigantic agribiz, gigantic manufacturing supply lines and gigantic commercial networks. All that stuff's going to have to get finer and smaller. And let's not forget that uh, societies are essentially emergent organisms, and they follow the law of emergence, which simply stated means they respond to the circumstances that reality
Yeah.
presents at a particular time and place in history. And the reality is that the mandates of reality are telling us that we got to get smaller, finer, simpler, and we've got to have a clearer understanding of what wealth actually means and how it is related to human enterprise, rather than just, clipping coupons,
Right.
making fraudulent transactions on a computer, swindling your fellow man, and you know, behaving dishonestly.
Yeah.
And when I said a little while ago that what's missing is personal honor in our society now, it's just been exterminated. Uh, you know, human societies require a certain level of trust to operate.
Right.
And you can't just throw it out the window and expect institutions to work okay, because they just don't. And that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah. It's really interesting from I don't know. I look at it from the history. I look at history in terms of its implications for the future, and
Sure.
what you get is it's almost any domain that you select, whether it's chemistry or physics or geopolitics or any other kind of things, has this same kind of characteristic. There are long periods at first of stability, and then there's a giant shift of one sort or another, and then there's a shorter period that is 1/10 of the size of the one that preceded it, and then
Mhm.
the next one goes for that period of time, and then the next one is 1/10, and that's what gets you the kind of the exponential curve, the hockey stick, as you talk about it. And so not only are the eras, the periods of time are becoming shorter and shorter, but the transition times between the eras are also being compacted. And so what you're into is just amazing kind of change in short periods of time, if history is any kind of an indication of all of this. And the question kind of is, can human effectively kind of deal with it all, with AI and other kinds of stuff coming in? It's just a real use, kind of fundamental and legitimate question to say, can we run fast enough? Can we keep ahead of this?
Well,
Or it's
part of that is, assuming that, let me back up a little. It amuses me that you listen to these debates about AI, and the one thing that the parties never talk about is how fragile the electric system is in this world, especially in the USA. It's like the most fragile
yeah,
major system that we depend on. They seem to assume that it's just going to continue working no matter what, and they'll always be able to plug in, one of their computers or keep their server farms going. And I don't see that at all. I think that one thing that's going on is a race between the disintegration of our infrastructure and our continued ability to generate more mischievous
that's
computer
that's very nice.
stuff.
Yeah, that's nice. I haven't thought about it in those terms before. That's good.
Yeah, and I think we're going to lose that race. Or let me put it differently. I think the world of complexity and computers is going to lose that race. The singularity is going to lose that race,
Mm.
and that's why I wrote 4 novels under the rubric of World Made by Hand, because I think we're heading for a major timeout from progress.
Well, I hope that that's what you're going to talk about when you come here to Berkeley Springs in
You bet.
13th of January to Transition Talks. Uh, I want to remind everybody that not only do we have a nice room that we can put 250 people in, but we're also going to live stream this. And so that doesn't make any difference where you are in the world. You can access the event and watch it again for 6 months. And so it's a pretty good deal. And we have a good time in our little resort town. It's probably somewhat like Saratoga Springs or something, but it's a lot of community and it's a very nice place. And we're going to have dinner together and some other kind of things, and we always do after our program. And so everybody gets a chance to see. I hope you'll bring some of your books along, and then get a chance to sign some of those and so on. So, but we're looking forward to having you with us, Jim.
Oh,
Very
thanks.
much.
I'm looking forward to coming. I've been off the lecture circuit for like 2 years because, the campuses did not want to bring people on board who were retailing uncomfortable ideas.
Oh yeah. Well, we try to push we try to be provocative and not just confirm what you've already thought. And so we're
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
looking forward to having you. So thank you very much,
You're quite
James
welcome, John.
Howard Kunstler. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to having you with us. See you next month. Happy
Okay.
holidays.
Thank you. You too.